What's up, guys? So last week in Advanced Training Techniques, we finished up all our back training, so now we're moving on to leg training. But we're gonna break that up into 3 separate videos. That was kind of awkward there, that's 3. 3 separate videos. We're gonna do 1 for hamstrings, 1 for quads, and then 1 for calves. So today we're gonna go ahead and we're gonna start with hamstring training. Let's jump into some basic anatomy because it's really important to understand the basic anatomy of the hamstrings in order to understand how to properly train them. So spin bones around here, a little pat on the ass bones. So technically, there are 3 muscles in the hamstrings. There's the biceps femoris, there's the semimembranosus, and the semitendinosus. But now the biceps femoris actually has 2 heads, a long head and a short head. So first we'll talk about those. Let's start with the short head. Now the short head is unique out of the hamstrings because it is the only one of the heads that is monoarticulate, meaning it only crosses one joint, and that's going to be the knee joint. So it originates from the back of your femur and attaches down here on your fibula. As it shortens like this, it's going to pull your leg backwards. So that's gonna look like this. This right here is flexion at the knee. Now the difference between the short head and the long head is the origination point. So the long head originates all the way up here on the back of your pelvis, inserting down here on the fibula. So the exact same thing, as this muscle shortens, it's going to pull your leg backwards, your lower leg backwards. But this is a polyarticulate muscle, meaning it crosses 2 joints. So not just your knee, but your hip. So what does that really mean? Well, that means that you can work this muscle from either the bottom to the top or the top to the bottom. So what would be an example of bottom to top? Well, that's gonna be any of your curling movements, because as that muscle shortens and it's pulling your leg up, that's going to be just primarily focusing on that knee joint. So what would be maybe a top to bottom approach? Well, that's gonna be your stiff-legged deadlift, because as I come down here and pull myself back up, that's this muscle, that's both the biceps and the semitendinosus and semimembranosus. As those shorten here, it's creating that pull, which is going to pull on the back of your pelvis, pulling your upper body upright. So, long story short, to really train your hamstrings, you have to work it from multiple angles. So how do we do that? Well, one way is to do hamstring curls. Now there's 2 different ways to do that. There's seated leg curls, there's a lying leg curl, and there's also a standing leg curl, but that more mimics a lying leg curl. So let's walk over there and I'll show you the difference. So this is a seated leg curl. As I sit in the machine here, notice the position of my legs relative to my body. There's almost a 90-degree angle here. And what this is doing is creating tension in my hamstrings. Think about if you were standing doing a stretch, you're reaching towards your toes, you're stretching your hamstrings. So in this position, my hamstrings are slightly stretched, and this is creating a little bit of tension on the muscle, which is a good thing for peak contraction. Matter of fact, go back and watch the video I did on optimal muscle length tension relationship. In order to get a muscle to really contract, you have to have that optimal length in the muscle to create a little bit of tension. And so in a seated position, you're doing that. So a leg curl, we're focusing just on the knee joint, and that's going to be that curling action. So as this muscle in your hamstring shortens, it's pulling your lower leg backwards, just like this. So this is an isolation exercise just for your hamstrings. Now here's something important that I want you guys to focus on. As you do these, keep your feet relaxed. Don't point them up like this, don't point them out like that. Here's the reason why. Your gastrocnemius, one of the muscles in your calves, also crosses your knee joint. So as you flex your calves, you're engaging them. So you want to keep your calves nice and relaxed when you're doing any of your curls. So just kind of let your feet dangle. So relax feet and you curl backwards. So that's going to shorten the hamstrings, and that's going to focus just on the knee joint. Now if I come over and do a lying leg curl, now it's going to be the same concept. I'm focusing just on the knee joint, nothing's happening at the hip, but as I curl, we're focusing on the same thing just like we did in a seated leg curl, but here my torso is straight. I'm not leaning forward. So I don't have that same tension that I do in a seated position. Now, there are machines that you can do where you're in a standing position, and most of them are unilateral, and you're going to curl back just like this. So it's the same thing. All three of those exercises are focusing on the knee joint. So when most people think hamstrings, that's what they're thinking, is any kind of curling motion. But like I said, because those muscles cross your hip joint, it's also going to help with extension of your back at the hip. So that's going to be your stiff-legged deadlift. So as I come back up, as those muscles shorten, they're going to pull on the back of my hips, and that's going to pull my torso upright. So a stiff-legged deadlift. Now there's also one exercise that mimics a stiff-legged deadlift, and that's going to be hyperextensions. So depending on if you're doing back day or leg day, you can do this exercises two different ways. And that rhymes. Hey, what do you say? If I were doing back, I would go ahead and I would flex my spine and hyperextend it. That's shortening the muscles in my back. But if I keep my back straight the entire time, this is just like a stiff-legged deadlift. Now I'm creating tension in the hamstrings and then shortening the hamstrings to pull my torso back up. It's the same exact movement, just doing it a different way. Now, when it comes to compound movements, say a squat. So as I squat down, remember it's wrapping around the back of my hips. So as I squat back up, those muscles are pulling, they're shortening, and that is what's helping me straighten and come back up. So your quadriceps and your hamstrings are working in conjunction. The two of them are working together. Remember, any of your curls, that's an isolation exercise for hamstrings. In any kind of pressing movement, whether it's a leg press or whether it's a squat, that's going to be at the hip where you really engage your hamstrings. Now, my favorite hamstring exercise is the walking lunge. Look at an Olympic sprinter. They've got big hamstrings, and that's because your hamstrings are going to help pull you forward. It's not just your quads pushing. So as I come down and I come back up, I'm pulling myself forward. So those are the basic exercises for targeting your hamstrings. Now we're gonna go ahead and cover quads and calves next, but after we do that, we'll bring it all together in a complete workout with exercises, sets, and reps, and I'll show you how to do a complete leg workout. So I'll see you guys next week.